The other day I uploaded a video what a recorded history, and then somebody wrote, "Oh, you should do a video of what you think about Catholicism." So here's my video, what I think about Catholicism. Let's do a history of Catholicism as well as what I think about Catholicism. And I think that's a cool thing to do. Whenever anybody does a video, what I think about something, they should include the history that they know. I think history is the rock that every other subject is based on, and as much as you include history is the best because you can understand why it is the way it is and what the original idea was and how it changed and how it should, which way it should go and which way it is going. So, Catholicism. Well, Catholicism is, in a nutshell, is the continuation of the Roman Empire. It is the dream of the Europeans to have a united Europe. That is a common dream that everybody in the world, or a lot of the people in the world have. And everybody at some extent has. We want to be united. We want to be a civilization. Feel like we're all together. The Chinese did it in 221 BC under the Yuan dynasty, or the Jin dynasty, when they took over the whole country, and then he abused everybody and to build the Great Wall of China, and so they had a rebellion after he died, and then it broke up, but then it came back together, and like that was the beginning of the dream. And so once it happens and they see the benefits of standardizing axle lengths and standardizing roads and signs and languages and making everything really transparent and easy to have a one world government, you can accomplish more and invent more. So that's basically, I think, how the Catholic Church came about. So the history of the Catholic Church is, well, Jesus, he lives his life, and he was had revolutionary ideas of strength being trying to incorporate having a love for all of mankind and not just your own nucleus. And so when people step over other people and rob from people and take advantage of people, they're only hurting themselves. And if you help other people, you're helping yourself, and you get to go to the kingdom of heaven, and those others have to go to the kingdom of hell. I think in the original Christianity, they understood that about reincarnation, just like the Greeks did. Atalanta, the female runner who would race the men, they said, Herodotus said she was reborn as an athlete, whereas Oedipus was reborn as a dog because he raped or had sex with his mother and killed his father. They believed in reincarnation, and I think they had an easier time of understanding that back then. And that's how karma works. You get to reborn in a better world. Maybe they didn't like the idea of reincarnation because then, well, why would you be reborn? You'd have to be reborn in a better world, because if you're born in this world in a rich family, well, that means that the rich people are good. And maybe the normal poor people wouldn't have liked that, so it's just better and easier intellectually to just believe in heaven, some world out there apart from the earth, and then hell, some other world. So, but anyways, Christianity grew, and Jesus supposedly said to Peter, now all of this is supposed because they didn't write the Bible until 65 AD, which was, I don't know exactly when Jesus died, I guess like 30 years after he died. He was born in 4 BC, and I don't know the dates down perfectly, and died in 33, so like 30 years after he died, between 30 and 50 years after he died, they were writing the Bible, and a lot of people didn't even know who wrote the Bible. I mean, the Revelation was written by John, but they don't know which John it was, but supposedly they said that Jesus said that Peter was going to take over the church. He said, "You are the rock." And I think under that context, he said, "Yeah, you are the guy. You are the best leader. So take it." But people like to have a consolidation and a history of something to help it keep it real, for better and for worse. I think that's done. It's just that's how the world was. You get people together and groups together, and we are the Christians, and it would work well that way. It got screwy when the Muslims came along and said, "We are the Muslims. Jesus isn't God." Well, the Christians should have said, "Okay, you are the Muslims and you believe in God, and we are the Christians," and it's kind of like we expand into each other's religion. But unfortunately, they I guess racially they look too different or something, but they couldn't come together because of the fault of the Christians, I think, mostly. But so they have Peter, and then they have Linus, who they don't really know anything about, and then like Sixtus. They had all these different, as time went on, they kind of traced the boss of the Christians, and the Christian sect grew bigger and bigger and bigger until they took over. They took over Alexandria in 350, and they're starting to take over the world. Europe. People are starting to become less and less interested in all the polytheistic gods, all the pantheon, the Roman and Greek pantheon of gods, and believing them and praying to these gods and going to their altar and asking them to give them things, and each person having their favorite god, because maybe because they hadn't seen the aliens land for a long time, and there hadn't been any sightings, and so people were just like, all right, well, God is some thing out there, and a lot of people were saying, oh, God he's a man, sure, just like the pantheon, but he's only one man, and it's for everybody. And then other people were thinking, oh, okay, well, God is just the eternal omniscientness of the universe, and there's spirits everywhere, and the world is alive, because they had animism back then, all the different Wiccans and stuff. Each tree had its own spirit, and so Christianity grew, and it was kind of that idea of believing in one God was starting to supplant the pantheon. So then in 325, Constantine, the emperor, was having a civil war, I think. And he's marching in northern Italy, and supposedly he and his army see a giant red cross burning in the sky, and under it the words, "With this cross you shall conquer." And that was the cross of Jesus. So he said, oh, of course. Maybe it was just a political thing, because politically at that point so many people were becoming Christian that to become Christian would be a good way to consolidate your power. Rome was pretty much losing its dominance militarily in Europe over the years, because all of the other barbarian groups were becoming familiar with Roman war techniques, and the Roman economy was kind of permeating out, and so there were different kingdoms, and there were rebellious kingdoms also who knew Roman technology and Roman war technology and everything, but they didn't want to pay so many taxes to Rome, and because Rome did have a history from time to time of abusing those. So they had to use another way to consolidate society. And so instead of doing it through force and military, because they couldn't do that anymore, before they could, because they had the roads, they had all superior fighting forces, the other people were using ancient ways of running out naked, screaming with the axe, instead of being in formation. So now the new way to consolidate power in a bad way is to just say, we're Christian then, and I'll be the Christian leader. And then the Christians were saying, okay, well then I guess we'll be part of Rome, and we like Rome. So they supplanted it. And that was all for power. But on the other side, it is good to have, I think, a one world government. Kind of like an educated person acting as a go-between. That's kind of what the Pope was for a long time. He was the mediator between different kings throughout Christendom, because Constantine became Christian in 325, and then they started the edict of the Council of Nicaea in 325, where they collected all the different writings from the teachings of Jesus and the Old Testament, because Jesus was a Jew and he used a lot of stories from the Old Testament, and created the Bible. They chose what they wanted and they left out what they wanted to make their own little Bible. And I think they chose to, let's not believe in reincarnation, let's just believe in this heaven and hell thing. And then over time they started using it as a way, because they couldn't use war and I'll kill you as a way to control people. They started using, we're gonna put your soul in hell for all eternity. And it's crazy how much people they got away with doing that. And that's eventually what caused the Reformation. But so yeah, that's in 325, and then they all become Christian. And so then the Roman Empire actually officially falls in the year 476, after getting progressively smaller and smaller and smaller until it was basically just a kingdom, in Italy. And then it falls, and then there's all these other kingdoms, but they're all Christian. And they have their leader who is in Rome. So the Roman Empire was still in existence in the form of the Catholic Church, but it was a different kind of a government. Instead of the emperor being the guy who directs all of the armies, he becomes the guy who directs all of the philosophical, religious rules. And so then for a long time, people look up to him and they do what he says. If he says that you can't have divorce, and I think they made a lot of rules that were good for society, that they thought helped keep society together. You can't have divorce so that you can have a family and grow smart kids, and this kind of a thing. And so it was very Rome was kind of still Rome, and until 800, when Charlemagne, who was a French king, started his own empire up there in France and Spain and Germany, and that was kind of exciting for Europe at the end of the wars, because now there was this one good king who was using his money and his influence to educate people, open up churches, which a church is basically the counterpart to present day university. It's where people learn to read, and people learned history, and people learned proper ways to live, religious rules and stuff. And so the big book, the one book, was the Bible that the Emperor Constantine put together. And so they read that over and over, and maybe they only had one book because that's all the resources in those days would allow, just to carry one book. If you have too many conflicting ideas. And so yeah, they had that. And then the church, he came and to Italy, visited the Pope, and the Pope said, "You are the Holy Roman Emperor." So there's a new Roman Empire. And so then they kind of had the Holy Roman Empire, which is the Catholic Empire, or sort of then became just German people empire, but a conglomeration of different kingdoms, kind of trying to work together with one central guy overseeing. But the Pope, I think, for the good part of the Catholic Church, is the Pope was an intermediary between different kings, and trying to help tell them what, help them decide the difference between right and wrong, because it was really blurry back in those days. People are always breaking laws because they know that if they don't do it now, then they're going to get perpetrated on, and so just trying to keep the peace. But then it got over out of control, and the Pope started. The popes at one point, like in the late 900s, it turned into this big, just like in the Roman Empire, they had these periods where they would have these emperors who were just crazy, just out for power. And so, yeah, there was a time in the late 900s where the popes People just became pope because it meant you could have power, and because they still got their tax money from the Catholics, and so they had money and wealth, and so they had popes that had parties. And there was one pope. He was they made him pope they made him a priest at the age of 7, and then they made him like a cardinal at the age of 13, and then he was pope at the age of 18. And he was like crazy. He was like Nero or Caligula, or no, not quite as bad. Just a crazy like king. And he just had parties, and he turned the Sistine Chapel, or wherever the central where the Pope lived, into a brothel. And he just partied, and then he partied so hard that he died of a stroke at the age of 27. And then they had some other popes in there who, like, people would pay to get in to become the pope, and then other popes would kill other popes. And for a while, like, popes kept killing each other. And one pope took over from another pope he didn't like, so he exhumed his body and cut his hands and feet off and had like a public trial and condemned him to hell, the body of the dead pope to hell, and then threw him in the river, in the Tiber River. And so all the Catholics in the town like didn't like that, so they executed him, and then they got a new pope. And at one point, they say that there was a woman pope who had a baby while she was in a parade, but it turns out that was just a Pope Joan. That was just a tale. It's not a very believable tale. You'd know it was and they didn't know it was a woman until she had the baby, but you'd know it was a woman if she's pregnant. So then in like the 1100s, they had this thing. It was called the Babylonian captivity. It was when the Pope moved to France. He moved out of Rome and went into southern France somewhere because he was friends with the French king. And he basically lived like a king and kind of bastardized Catholicism. So they said, okay, we're going to just make another Pope here in Rome because the Pope should be in Rome. And then the other Pope moved back to Rome and said, okay, I'll move back to Rome. So now there's 2 popes. And each of them are saying, no, I'm Pope, no, I'm Pope. So then they said, okay, we'll fix this. All the other, bishops and other guys said, okay, we'll fix this by just making a 3rd Pope. And then you guys step down. But they were like, no way, we're not going to step down. And then the new Pope that they made said, no way, I'm the new Pope. So now there's 3 popes. So then they said, okay. What we're going to do is we're going to make a 4th Pope. And then you 3 popes step down. So they did that, and that worked. Whew. And but I think that Pope was actually ended up being a bad Pope, and they had to kill him too. But so it turned into this big power thing instead of the idea of just bringing people together. And then in the 1100s, they started having they had their own country for a while. It was called the Papal States, and it was given to him by a powerful maybe Austrian king or something. I can't remember how that happened, but they had like the central part of Italy was actually a country, and it was called the Papal States. It was the country of Catholicism, and they seemed to be doing well for a few years, but I guess they ran out of money. They got into debt or something, and then he wanted to make the Sistine Chapel or St. Peter's Cathedral. And so he started selling entrances into heaven to people all over Europe. And they called Europe Christendom. Like, that's what the country of Christendom was like. They were trying to keep the Roman Empire together in some way. So they had the Byzantine Empire, which was getting smaller, Holy Roman Empire, but that was just a few countries. So, but like everybody was Christian. It was called Christendom, and they didn't even call it Europe. So, but they started selling passages into heaven. If you pay me this, you get to go to heaven. And they did that so much that people started to rebel, and that's when Martin Luther penned up his 86 grievances. Most of them about how they shouldn't have to do these things. There's lots of rules, and so then that's when the Reformation happened. So then the church decided they'd change a little bit, and so they had the Counter-Reformation and invented the Jesuits and sent them out to try to convert people to Catholicism. So then Catholicism goes up, and then there was the Protestant Church in England. King Henry wanted to divorce his wife Catherine of Aragon because she couldn't give him a baby son, and the Pope was friends with the King of Spain, who was Catherine of Aragon's father, and so he didn't want to piss him off, so he decided to not let Henry VIII divorce her, so he just left the church. So the church excommunicated King Henry, and then in the St. Peter's, he actually made a big globe of the world with Europe, but God's hand was on top of England, blotching out England. But I think England wanted to be Protestant because church was just this economic machine, stratified with all these different levels of this guy tells this guy what to do, this guy tells this guy what to do, and when everybody's ignorant and they like to be told what to do, then that works. But as soon as people start to becoming educated and they invent the printing press, then you have to let people think for themselves. And the church was behind the times on that. The printing press was invented in like 1420 or something, and King Henry was like the 1500, late 1400s, early 1500s. So people were starting to become more and more educated. And so they just and the church people, they didn't know what they should. They weren't more educated than normal people. They did a poll of 300 different church bishops in England, the top ones, and only 80 of them could recite the 10 Commandments. So they just wanted to kick the Catholics out, and then. So then for the years after that, Catholicism has been getting kind of smaller and smaller. And then recently, since the 60s, it took a hit and became half as large. It lost half of its membership because of the whole hippie revolution and because they didn't want to get rid of they didn't want to legalize birth control. And so in the name of power, they're not keeping up on the times, and it's a really interesting example of how really old institutions have trouble. Aren't the ones that lead the world, but the Roman Empire still exists in one way. The Catholic Church still they have their own country. It's just this small couple of blocks area in Rome, but they own stuff all over the world. They own the big telescope, one of the biggest telescopes in America, outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and it's like a big business. They have their own bank and police force and everything. So a lot of people can say that they're part of some conspiracy in bed with the New World Order, the Illuminati, the really rich banksters, the banking institutions who siphon off our money and use it secretively. I don't know. There are some things that they don't agree with each other. The Pope wants to ban natural or contraception, and that aids towards overpopulation. And one reason that I think maybe the Pope wants to do that is to try to it's just a power thing, to try to keep as many Catholics as they can in the countries that are Catholic, and make them bust up the population so that Catholicism can stay a big country. But Catholicism is turning into a third world or a South American mainly religion, as Europe is going away from them. But I'm a believer in legacy, and I think that would be cool, and I think it's very possible for the Catholic Church to catch up with the modern times and continue off into the wild blue yonder, keep going for another 1,000 years. But it would need to reform dramatically, just like a lot of people need to reform. Our government needs to reform, so maybe once they have this Ratzinger Pope die, because he's an old guy, and maybe they elected in an old guy so that he would just be like a transitional pope, so that in a few years, maybe 10 or 20 years, when he dies, they can get a really young pope in, who's really open-minded and really socially liberal, and can and by then the Catholic Church will just be a small church. It'll be like a kingdom, kind of like how the Roman Empire turned into a kingdom and then fizzled out. Well, by then the numbers will be so small that they'll just be like, all right, well, let's do anything. Let's do something wild, and let's get a really socially liberal person in. And he gets in there, and then he maybe is just total hippie and says, the aliens are here. Let's believe in all religions and reincarnation, yes. But he still does the same Pope stuff and dresses in the same thing. And I think all religions should continue, because the dress is pretty. We're honoring our past and doing the rites and the rituals and the song and dance whole thing kind of is like reenacting. We love to reenact the past. We reenact battles from the past, and so I think being a Catholic is cool, but being a radical Catholic is really cool. And because Catholicism is not as radical as a lot of other religions. It doesn't have to be the religion of the ultra-conservative, control freak, everybody else is going to burn in hell unless you bow down to Jesus type of a religion. It can be progressive. The Roman Empire, in the beginning of its reign, was progressive. I mean, that's why it was popular. It was liberal. It allowed anybody to free market society. It allowed anybody to come to Rome and do whatever they want, and that's how they grew. And that's how anything grows. So I hope the Catholic Church can do that. But the Catholic Church from the last few years has been like mind-bogglingly, even in recent times, mind-bogglingly controlling. I saw a video about Islam, and there was a white American woman, and she was saying that she used to be a Catholic, a nun, but she wasn't allowed to read the Bible. And this is recent. So she became a Muslim. And the Catholic Church did fight against if you study, the more and more you study the actions of the Catholic Church, the more and more you're going to think that the Catholic Church is evil. And I think pretty much all Catholics don't know the history of the Catholic Church, and if they did, they wouldn't be Catholic anymore, because Catholic Church fought against the printing press. They pretty much fought against the literacy for certain periods. I mean, it was good and it was bad. I mean, if you study the history of the Catholic Church and you only focus on the good things, you're going to love it, because they did a lot of because I think as we move forward through in time, we become gradually more and more civilized. I don't think that unless something catastrophic happens, I don't think we go backwards in evolution. In that sense, I don't think there was a Dark Ages. There was just a restructuring of Europe so that Europe could grow in a non-centralized way. And so, of course, there were some hiccups. Some of the roads became unmaintained, and there's feudalism, but overall, that was breeding ground for the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the printing press and people opening their minds. But it happened slowly, and I think Catholicism and that whole monotheism, believing there's one God for everybody, it takes a while for people to transform from believing in all of these different alien God pantheon who you pray to ask for something, into believing that the whole universe is alive and that's God. So they did it in stages. They went from believing in the pantheon, and you ask Zeus to help you, give you money when you give him 3 chickens, until you believe in one God, but you do the same thing. You ask God to give you, if you give God 3 chickens, then he will grant life to your son or something like that. And so then, of course, the Catholic Church was doing that. And so the Catholic Church, I mean, even up in the 1100s, when you were paying the Catholic Church to go to heaven, just like 1,000 years before, being really primitive. But I think overall we do evolve into the future, and in a few years, just in maybe a decade or two, I think the Catholic Church will officially be saying that God is this being, that everything is alive, everything, inanimate objects, there's no inanimate objects, everything's alive, and that all religions are right, that reincarnation exists, and that will transfer into them saying that contraception is okay because you're not killing a spirit, because you can't kill a spirit, everything gets to live forever. And but it might take Catholic Church becoming really small and losing a lot of its members, even more members than it has lost, and they deserve to lose all the members that they've lost with all the control that they have and the things that they say you can't do, and fighting against progress and people thinking for themselves. But that's all I know about Catholic. I don't know anything really about modern Catholic Church, any of the rules or anything like that. But I think one main difference between Catholicism and like Protestant religions is Catholicism, like their idea is that if you want to go to heaven, you just have to you have to confess. And I like that. You confess and share yourself, and then you can get all the weight lifted off of your shoulders, and then you can go to heaven. But some of the other people, I had some other ideas, like Calvinism believes that you just, you're either going to go to hell or you're going to go to heaven since the day you're born, and it doesn't matter what you do. It was kind of like a sarcastic, reactionary way of saying, doing all this Catholic stuff doesn't help you. You just believe and you got to go to hell. Heaven. So yeah. My idea is, just believe you're going to go to heaven, and you go to heaven, everybody goes to heaven. I'd like to study in all the different rites and rituals. Maybe I'll do a video about that later. So that's what I think about Catholicism, Catholic Church.